And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here, ready to go with a special Wednesday afternoon version of UFO News Network Sunday. We've got a jam-packed show, a fantastic guest. My co-host today, Chant, is going to bring her in just a moment. We've got a little bit of news we're going to discuss. I'm pretty confident that I know exactly where all the very best UFO data goes for the U.S. military. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later and lay that out. But first things first, we've got a fantastic guest. So let me bring in my co-host, Chant Hanna. And Chant, good afternoon. Well, good morning to you. Good afternoon from the East. How are you today? And why don't you introduce our special guest, okay?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thank you so much. Yes, we have a very special guest on today. We have Paola Harris, an Italian-American photojournalist and investigative reporter in the field of UFOs and extraterrestrial-related phenomena research. She is also a widely published freelance writer, especially in Europe. She has studied extraterrestrial-related phenomena since 1979 and is on personal terms with many of the leading researchers in the field. From 1980 through 1986, she assisted Dr. J. Allen HYNEK with his UFO investigations and has interviewed many top military witnesses concerning their involvement in the government truth embargo. In 1997, Ms. Harris met and interviewed Colonel Philip CORSO in Roswell, New Mexico, and became a personal friend and confidant. She was instrumental in having his book, The Day After Roswell, for which she wrote the preface, translated into Italian. She returned to Roswell in the summer of 2003 for the American debut of her newly revised book, Connecting the Dots, Making Sense of the UFO Phenomena. Her second book is entitled, How Do You Speak to a Ball of Light? Details possible conclusions to UFO enigma and orbs and spheres of light. One of Paola's most recently published books, Exopolitics, Stargate to a New Reality, contains 23 new exciting interviews with international expert witnesses and has also been translated into Italian and Spanish. Her book, All the Above and Beyond, has 10 interviews with Latin American contactees about meeting human-like extraterrestrials who are coming off ships to interact with humans in Latin America. Released in 2018, her latest book, Conversations with Colonel CORSO, details the Army's and CORSO's role in back engineering alien technology in the Pentagon. Ms. Harris has her own YouTube channel and is also in the video Fast Walkers, put out by Safe Space producer Robert Miles, and her interview of Canadian former Minister of Defense Paul Hellyer has been translated into 4 languages, and many of her interviews are on YouTube. She has spoken all through Europe, Ireland, England, Norway, Switzerland, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, Germany, and Belgium of the importance of full disclosure. Her new production company, Starworks USA, produces the Starworks USA Laughlin UFOs and Consciousness November conferences. It will continue to bring international speakers to the USA, the intention being to promote disclosure, consciousness raising, and exopolitical dialogue worldwide. Paola lives in Longmont, Colorado, and travels to Rome and Italy often. She has a master's degree in education. She teaches history and photojournalism and online classes in exopolitics for Dr. Michael Sala's Exopolitics Institute, for which she is an international liaison director. Welcome, Paola.
Well, it's easier to say Paula Harris. Let's do Paula.
Okay.
For the American, for the American audience, Paola is really hard. It's so I think Paula would be good. And thank you. I've been looking forward to this. You've been writing to me, so I've been following you on Facebook.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you here on the show with us.
Well, thanks. It's important that, we talk about this because this subject is something that I dream about, should be in the university. I mean, what's happened is it's become a fringe subject, entertainment, little gray aliens, a lot of silliness. And I, having a master's in education and being a high school English teacher for 30 years, I really want to talk to serious people about all of the data, which is so much out there, I mean, and I wish we could do that in a university setting, so I'm going to say that right off the bat.
But real quick, I want to jump right in, and I looked over all your stuff, and you've covered a lot of ground over the years. But I've got to tell you, I've got a real fascination for anything related to UFOs going back to the Truman years. And the first case, the one that got everybody's attention back in the summer of 1947, was the Kenneth Arnold case. Not too long ago, you had the opportunity to interview Kim Arnold, and who was the daughter of Kenneth Arnold. I loved the interview. I thought it was fantastic. How did you find Kim, or did she find you? How did all that come about?
Well, I've been on Coast to Coast, and Arnold's granddaughter came on and asked to speak to me. Chanel, her name is Chanel, and that's Kenneth Arnold's granddaughter. So I contacted her. She left a telephone number, and I said, "Can I speak to your mom?" And really, it was very, very tense because Kim Arnold did not want to speak. I'm the only journalist that ever got to her. She said because ever since her father had the sighting, and this happens a lot with that, her family has gone through hell. That she didn't want to, she was a little girl. She didn't want to live through it again. The people went after them. That they came to their house, that, they accused her father of being a liar, and she didn't want to deal with all of the UFO community. And I'm going to add, Colonel CORSO said the same thing. He's sorry he ever read the book. He said the whole community came after him too. And the sad part, Frank, is that our own people, our own researchers become the debunkers. They don't do the background. They don't do the homework. All they do is diss anybody that comes out of the woodwork with somebody like Colonel CORSO, who worked in the Pentagon, went through hell. So he never spoke in the United States. He ended up, I was living in Italy for 15 years, so we ended up bringing him to Europe, and that's where he spoke.
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello?
Yep, okay. Yeah, you broke up a little bit. Sorry about that.
Well, he spoke in Europe as well. I'll just recap what I said. He didn't speak in the United States. He spoke in Europe.
Okay. Now, the Arnold case, it's a really fascinating case. Basically, he was flying east. He was a salesman and had a large enough territory that he literally used to fly from appointment to appointment to go out and see his customers. And he was flying east, roughly towards Mount Rainier. He was able to pick up the UFOs roughly around Mount Rainier, and they flew basically across his field of view down towards Mount Hood. And because he had sort of those mile markers to determine the speed, he estimated that speed at roughly 900 to 1,500 miles an hour, give or take. I don't have the details in front of me, but he estimated this enormous speed, and that, of course, in those days, there was no aircraft on Earth capable of flying at those kind of speeds, and that's what really got his attention. That's what got national attention, and that's what got the Air Force's attention as well. Of course, the Air Force came out, they interviewed him, they investigated the case, and they basically gave him sort of their seal of approval that this guy's a solid witness, and we think he saw what he said he saw. And that, as you're saying, that didn't seem to help with the public too much. He got a lot of heat from the public, a lot of negative reaction, you're saying.
Yeah, he got, and from researchers. I mean, from researchers in general. That was 1947. Remember, 1947 is a big year. The reason why Kenneth Arnold is famous is he coined the phrase flying saucer. But 1947 is also the year of Roswell. So 1947, but I've been researching a crash in San Antonio, New Mexico, 1945. So, and I've been working on it for 7 years. So the Army Air Force at that time, it was not just the Air Force, they were together, knew about UFOs. They knew about it. I mean, if you're having crashes in the New Mexico area right after the atomic bomb goes off, you're not going to throw away all the stuff. You're not going to not pay attention. And the one in San Antonio happened 1 month after the atomic bomb went off in Trinity site. at the Trinity site near Socorro. So they all knew, but this all started because of the atomic bomb explosion. Somebody's attention was captured. In other words, somebody out there in all the, UFO land that is flying around is going to notice that this species has gone into the nuclear age.
Paula, you're talking about the Lonnie Zamora incident, right?
No,
outskirts of Socorro.
That came a little bit. That came in '64.
No.
Right, 64.
That was after,
okay, so
yeah.
you said it
I'm
happened.
talking about this. It happened in August of 1945. 45, not 47. 2 years before. Yeah. The bomb went off July 16th, 1945. I know that because I was born that year. The thing is that if there is a crash, and it's called a San Antonio crash, people can go online. Two little boys, Remy Baca and Jose Padilla, saw the crash, saw the craft, went up to it, reported it to the Army Air Force. It took a week to clean up all these witnesses. This happened the same year as Roswell, but it's in that New Mexico area. Then the Army Air Force knows that there are UFOs already in 45, before Kenneth Arnold, because they're seeing them, there's pictures of them over the Trinity site where we exploded the bomb. For me, as a researcher, the explosion of the atomic bomb started all the UFO activity.
Yeah, getting back to Arnold a little bit, after he had his sighting and initially got a lot of attention, in a lot of ways he sort of became the very first UFO researcher. He really got into it. Did Kim go into any of all that a little bit? I mean, he was obviously fascinated by it.
Yeah, but they, like anybody, they try to deflect him. He was interested in the Maury Island case that you probably read about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which he believes was real, but they tried to convince him it wasn't.
Yeah, that was
he began.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
He basically had trouble because it was being kept secret, and you can't ask too many questions.
Well, that Maury Island case was quite a case because the two investigators who had actually originally interviewed Arnold went there and investigated that case as well. They picked up some sort of fragment from the UFO that it had dropped some sort of like molten metal into a boat, I believe, that one of the witnesses was on. And they picked it up, and they were actually killed in a plane crash while they were flying back to their base.
Yeah, while they were trying to complete their investigation. It's actually considered the first incident where a witness claimed that a man in black intimidated him into silence. And it took place before the Roswell crash. Yet there were many similarities between the two.
It's Roswell crash. The Roswell crash is a crash. This is people reporting UFOs in the newspaper, and it's getting attention. So we got to look at the media attention. And this upset, if you're watching Project Blue Book on the History Channel, any kind of mention in the newspapers is going to upset the powers that want to control this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned Project Blue Book, and I'm assuming very early on when you started researching UFOs, this is when you came in contact with J. Allen Hynek. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
No.
Okay.
I know with Close Encounters. The movie Close Encounters was like, I'm not interested in UFOs. I was not interested. But I was teaching school because I have a master's in education. I was teaching science fiction, and I saw Close Encounters in 1979. Blue Book began in 1952, right. 20 years before. It ended in 1969 here at the University of Colorado with the Condon Committee report that just whitewashed the whole thing. We're all upset about that here in Colorado. Bad karma, whitewashed it. So I didn't meet Alan until 10 years later, in 1979, 1980, when I saw Close Encounters. And I went to his house in Evanston, not his house, but the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. And there he was. And with, you know what I'm upset about what's happening here on television, they don't give him the pipe. The whole time I worked with Alan, the whole 6 years, he never took that pipe out of his mouth. I mean, he was chewing on it, he'd smoke it. There's no pipe here. I'm going, this is crazy. But anyway, he came around the corner with this pipe, and he said to me, "You speak Italian?" 1979. I said, "Yes." He said, "Will you work and translate all the Italian sightings?" And that's when I brought Roberto Pinotti, that we had talked about from the Coon, over to America. I brought him over for Alan HYNEK. And then I began working with Alan HYNEK. But I'll tell you, all that was putting pins in maps. I mean, he'd call me and just say, you know, there's a flap over Indiana, put 5 pins over these cities. And at that time, I was so naive, and I knew nothing, that I didn't want to deal with anything inside the spaceship. I just wanted to put the pins in the maps.
Right.
I've gone 360 since then. I'm working in Latin America with contactees. And thank you, Chant, for mentioning that book, All of the Above and Beyond. Contactees in Peru that are seeing spacemen walk off ships. I've gone a long way.
Yes, we'd like to talk to you later about that. That's very interesting. I have my own questions about that. I would like to hear more about Dr. HYNEK, though, if you'd like to share more about him. Anything personal?
Yeah, he was a great guy. We had the same, he was a Taurus with Sagittarius rising. I was a Taurus for Sagittarius rising. He basically was very absent-minded. I drove the car when he was here in Colorado, and he'd forget his umbrella, his hat, everything. But we would discuss, he was an astronomer.
Yes.
So he would say to me, "Paula, don't ever mistake Venus for a UFO." And then I became close friends with the family. Mimi HYNEK was amazing. She's nothing like the one on TV, nothing.
Right.
She was interested in archaeology, very intellectual lady. And of course, I'm friends with Paul HYNEK, his youngest son. And I'm going to be doing some work with him here in Colorado. He's coming to do a lecture. So I knew the family. I knew this was real. I mean, you're working with an astronomer. You don't ask, are UFOs real, when you're working with a scientist? Mm-hmm. But I had nothing to do with the 701 Blue Book cases, because they closed that program in 1969. We were on to other stuff.
I see.
So basically, he was reaching out now, looking for more of the international cases. You had mentioned being focused on Italy. Do you know if he had somebody else who could speak French or Portuguese and pick up cases for maybe
absolutely.
Brazil or France, or he was working on that as well?
Yeah, he was. And if you want to know about where he was, he came to Italy about 4 times, but that's because I know Italy. But if you want to work on, you want to read the real story of what was going on, you have to read Jacques Vallée's Volume 3, Forbidden Science, because it's a diary of all the places HYNEK was. And Jacques Vallée is a brilliant writer. And Volume 3, Forbidden Science, has everything. It has the CIA involvement, how they want to spin this. Alan's frustration, his going to Brazil and Latin America, it has all of that. But my frustration, Chant, is that people don't read anymore. What they do is get their information quick and dirty on the internet.
Yeah, they take very little time to do research. I research day and night, and I've been telling people the same thing, which I stand behind, and that is the topic of ufology is similar to me to science, in that you can never really know all of it and be an expert on it in totality, but you can be an expert on it, or try to be, in different respects of it. So
yeah, but I think you can only be an expert of it because, you know, I'm a teacher. I'm going to say this, Chant.
Mm-hmm.
I can't teach a subject if nobody's reading the books. I mean, how can you teach anthropology if nobody read the books about the original source of anthropology or history? Mm-hmm. How can you teach it? I mean, how can you know what the heck is really going on? I'm lucky, Chant, in that I got to speak to all these people. I know everybody in the field, from John Mack to Jesse Marcel to Paul Hellyer to Colonel CORSO to everybody. So I not only read everything, but I also spoke to them.
Yes, including experiencers, contactees, and the like.
People Paula, you had mentioned crossing paths with HYNEK and then mentioned Valet. While you were working with HYNEK or since then, have you ever crossed paths with him? Because he is still at it, even after all these years. He's still involved.
Yeah, last year I met him for the first time. I was fascinated with him. He is the best of the best of the best. He's 79 now, and I think he has more answers than anybody and is making the most sense. He's amazing. He's an amazing man. I love that man. He's very gentle, but then he gave me 3 of his volumes of Forbidden Science, and I went through them with just like you do in high school with what do you call it?
The highlighter?
A highlighter. The whole thing is the highlighter. Then go, oh my God, here's the answer to what I've been looking for. Here's the answer. And I highlighted all the books, and I'm going, oh, this is everything. This is what I wanted to. He did it all. I mean, yes, he knows what. I didn't know him back then, but I guess destiny had it that I would not meet him until he was like 79.
Did Dr. HYNEK ever express to you any irritation or frustration at skepticism that he might have encountered regarding his studies of the phenomenon of ufology?
Yeah, Chant, because, you know, he was a skeptic. You know that he's the one that coined the term swamp gas.
Yes, yeah, which I know he felt very irritated about.
Yeah, he changed his mind, and everybody didn't give him a break. They'd go up to him and say, well, we knew it was real before you did, and you used swamp gas, and you should never said that, and, you know, when you use swamp gas, you know.
I know he said it in passing, and then journalists jumped all over him about that, took it, ran with it, and used that as the focal point, you know, for their articles. But did he ever tell you privately, you know, did he ever have any complaints to make about having to deal with mainstream media or anybody regarding skepticism about what he was doing for ufology? Because he did a lot for ufology after he did an about-face.
Yeah, he did. No, he did. And he'd say, I want to know what's going on before I die. I wish they would tell me. He'd say that. I want to know what's going on. But you know that it's now in deep black projects. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just did an interview with Emery Smith and he's really involved in deep black projects. I couldn't even believe that it's gone underground, but it's gone underground in the military-industrial complex. I mean, the real reason we don't know anything is because they're making money off of it, and they're not about to tell everybody. And it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got nothing to do with scaring people. It's got nothing to do with that. It's an economic issue, and I didn't understand that until I met Colonel CORSO, and he told me all the companies he went to with the artifacts that he had, and that they were making money off of it, and he said the primary source was to make weapons of war. Of course, he changed his mind, like HYNEK changed his mind, like John Mack changed his mind. These people that began as skeptics that saw things one way, they changed their mind when they saw things another way. And I really admired those people because those people didn't, you know, when someone tells you that it's not, we shouldn't be making weapons of war and using these technologies for this, and then you change your mind and say, no, I'm going to talk about it. You become a hero, and that's who I dealt with all of these heroes that I consider heroes who are no longer with us, unfortunately.
Now, you
Well,
had mentioned
go
Phil
ahead.
Corso, and how
I
did
was
you
just
cross paths with him? How did all that come about?
yeah.
Well, I'm just going to preface something. I'm on my way to the Consciousness Life Expo to do a presentation on all the coincidences and the weird stuff in my life. And that was one of them. I was living in Italy. My boss said, you got to go to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. We know it's a big party. Everybody in the world who's anybody will be there. But we want you to find this man named Philip Corso, and we want an interview for Italy. And then we want you to invite him here. Well, I don't want to go. I talk about this because I was getting over a romantic love affair. I was in depression. I didn't want to go. I was in depression. I said, I'm not leaving Italy. And he goes, yes, you are. You're going, and you'll do the story, my boss. And I went to Roswell, and of course, all the hotels are booked as of February, and this is happening in July. And I couldn't find a place to stay. I went to the media place. I said, I'm an Italian journalist. I need to sleep here in Roswell. Where can I get a place? And they said, open up the phone book. And I opened up the phone book, and it was I called the first place I saw, the Sally Port Inn. They had a room for 3 days, and the room was next to Philip Corso.
There you go.
That's incredible.
You don't think that's weird?
I think that's pretty cool.
Every place is booked.
Yeah.
It was one room. It's next to Corso.
Right. The synchronicity of that.
Yeah, but that's my whole life. That's like that. So since I found him at the museum, he said he wanted to talk to me because he was the head of intelligence in 1945 in Rome. He's Italian. He's Sicilian. He wants to talk to me, and here he is in the room next to me. And so that's a story. That's a whole show in itself. If you want to talk to me about that someday, because when he came in to do the interview, he gave me an interview about contact at White Sands. He did not give me the back engineering stuff. And so when he gave me the contact interview that he had with an ET, I, as a journalist, thought people would think he was crazy, and I didn't print it. And I'm ashamed of that. I'm really upset about what I did. I didn't print it until he died, but what I wanted was the story of his being in the Pentagon in the 1960s, of General Trudeau giving him all of the artifacts in a file. Now, remember, this is Army, so the Air Force has some. This is only Army, because people criticize him by saying, oh, but they were already working on the laser. But they were already working on this. Of course, if the Air Force had some, they're already going to be working on it. The Army got it when Corso had it, when he was working in research and development. And then Corso was very blunt about the companies he went to, like the night screening devices and the high tenacity fibers that he, like Kevlar and night screening, he said helped the soldiers in Vietnam see, night screening. And that came, he told me, from the lens of the ET. And if you've seen the Santilli footage, they peel off the eye, and that's a lens. The ET has a pupil under there. So Corso told me, he said, I had the lens, and I could see at night. We would walk up and down the halls of the Pentagon and could see all the furniture. So they back engineered that.
Do you believe that all the documents in that book, because I've read that book repeatedly, the copy I have is worn out. I wanted to know, do you feel the documents in that book are all legitimate?
The problem with anything is when you have a ghostwriter or when you have a co-writer, and that was Bill Burns, the criticism that all the people went after him for was there were mistakes. Colonel Corso was never at Roswell. He was at Fort Riley, Kansas, when he saw the bodies. He was not at Roswell. He was at Fort Riley. And when there's mistakes, all you need is 2 mistakes, and they cancel the whole book. The documents on Project Horizon that you're talking about, Chant, which is taking a nuclear device to the moon and exploding it, well, that's really intelligent stuff, right? Was real. Yeah, that's what we need. The species human are going to say, oh, yeah, we just discovered the moon. Let's take a a bomb there and shit, it exploded. It's not going to hurt anybody. The thinking is insane. It's insane, but that's what was happening. I believe those documents were real, but I believe there are mistakes in the book. But then I come to find out that they put mistakes in a lot of whistleblowers' books so they can have what's called plausible deniability, which means that they can throw out the whole book because of two mistakes and you don't get the real truth. Plausible deniability is one thing that the big, the insiders or whatever you want to call them, the people that worked on these projects use. So, yeah, I mean, what we got was his original manuscript, and that's called Dawn of a New Age, and you can download that on Open Minds TV network or Open Minds TV. He gave it to Alejandro Rojas and John Round, those guys. My boss gave it to them. Mauricio used to work for them, and Mauricio gave them the original manuscript with the permission of the Corso family and it's called Dawn of a New Age, not The Day After Roswell.
Yeah, I'm there. I see it right there. Okay, and I understand what you mean about plausible deniability. Also, I just wanted to mention to our listeners about Project Horizon so they understand a little bit more about it. Project Horizon was a 1959 study to determine the feasibility of constructing a scientific military base on the moon at a time when the U.S. Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force had total responsibility for U.S. space program plans. Did you want to continue talking about CORSO, or did you want to move on to Dr. John Mack? Because I had a few questions about both.
Well, when I was teaching in Rome, and that's how I had the money to do all this, because it's all come out of my pocket. I've never been sponsored by anybody, and that's why researchers do not go on location and go find out for themselves. I was teaching at the American Overseas School. I was there for 15 years. I brought over everybody to speak in Italy. I brought over Ryan Wood and Linda Howe and Jesse Marcel and John Mack and just a lot of different people. John stayed with me in my apartment in Rome, and we got to talk about a lot of his research at Harvard University. And he explained to me that the whatever abduction scenario, which has been the focal point of all ufology in the United States, the little gray alien, has finished in 1994. And Colonel Corso told me that was just a clone. They were afraid of the humans type people, aliens that made them, because he said the little gray is just a clone to fly the ship. Who told me a lot about the same thing as Jacques Vallée. I mean, this thing that our field here has become all abductions, all little gray aliens, is a big distraction to the fact that we had space people in the 1950s to the 1960s in Giant Rock, Southern California, with Van Tassel, Adamski, Raffaele Angelucci, and Howard Menger. I had to go back and study that and go back to Southern California and to speak to all the people that knew those guys in the 1950s to understand we were visited by people, space people. And so all of this, John Mack is telling me, finished in 1994, and he said, people are being directly downloaded, Paula. In other words, people are being contacted through meditation, through CE5s, Stephen Greer's protocols, going out and meditating and calling down UFOs, or being involved in wanting to communicate with them, especially if people have like psychic abilities and ESP. So I'm dedicating my whole conference this year, November 1 through 4 in Laughlin, Nevada, to remote viewing and ESP. Because that's what the government was using to communicate with, the people in SRI. And the ESP remote viewing is the only way you can really touch base with a culture, cosmic culture that isn't going to school to speak your language. And the thing is that I got interested in this because I have to not pay attention to what the mainstream UFO stuff is, which is still little gray aliens. And I had to go back and study that we had space brothers and that these people were real. And they stopped coming here, Chant. They went to Latin America, to Peru, to the Chilca Desert, to Sisto Paz and the group in the 1970s. So I had to see why we are hell-bent on still abductions, little gray aliens, and entertainment, and we're not looking at the messages coming out of Latin America.
Yes, you touched
Paola,
on a lot of stuff there. Go ahead.
Real quick. You had mentioned CORSO seeing ET remains, but also having a contact experience. He had I was not aware of this, if that's the fact, unless I'm misunderstanding you. He had an ET contact experience. Is that correct?
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it really fast?
Can you?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that because I wasn't aware of it.
So what happened was, I was next door in the room next door. He comes over, and he says to me, Paula, I need to tell you about what happened to me in 1957. He says, I think, he said, there was a crash over Roswell in 47, and the other, there were two, craft, and one appeared in 1957. In other words, there was a time warp, went through a portal and appeared in 57 at White Sands. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, because, he said, as I was driving in the desert, I saw a craft sitting on the ground near White Sands. He told me where it was, near Red Canyon. And he said, I went up to it. I was alone. I was in a Jeep, he said, and the craft was appearing and disappearing. So I threw some cactus under it. It squashed the cactus, he said, so I knew it was physical. And from the left-hand side of view, out of a cave, came a little being. It was a little man. It was not a gray. He had a helmet, and he had a silver band with a red stone in the middle, which he called the interface. And then he added, because I listened very carefully, we had several of those in the Pentagon. And I thought, whoa. And he said that Colonel Corso, being Italian and Sicilian, pulled out his Beretta, his gun, and pointed it at the being. And the being said, could you shut down your radars? They are interfering, and I can't leave. And that is why all the crashes, because of the interference of the radars with the propulsion of these craft. And so Colonel Corso said, yeah, but what will you have to offer me? No, he said, are you a friend or a foe? And he points the gun. And he asked me, what do you think he said, Paula? And I said, he said, neither. And that's what he said, neither. I'm not your friend or foe. That's the bottom line of ET contact, by the way. They're not friends and they're not foes. They're just there. And he said, will you shut down your radars? And Colonel Corso said, what do you have to offer me? And the being said, and Colonel Corso writes this on a napkin. And he said, a new world if you can take it. And then and Corso turns around to me and says, what does that mean, Paula? And my answer, and I'm ashamed about it, is I said, I don't want to know what that means. I said, I need another kind of interview. it's like I'm going, don't give me that. This is too hard for me. A new world, if you can take it, I have to offer you. If you let me go or you want to come aboard the ship, a new world, if you can take it. So a lot of my colleagues in the field have used that phrase, which comes from the CORSO contact. It's been used over and over again. And this contact is in that Open Minds manuscript, A New World, if you can take it. So we all knew about it, but I didn't want to write about it until after he died. And Corso had told me, you could read my book, Conversations on Colonel Corso, and there's a drawing of the being because he sent it to me via fax. And the being has suction cups on his fingers. It's very interesting. And this is not an abduction, by the way. I'd like to change the word abduction to contact because contact is a whole different world. When somebody's abducted, and somebody, Chant, when you abduct a kid or a woman, you slit their wrist, you rape them, and you throw them in the trash, and nobody does that. This is a human abduction, which is horrible. And what contact is different. It's, I think, and that's why I talked about my conference, it's an effort to raise consciousness. So I know we only have an hour, but my bottom line is that I'm working to raise human consciousness so that this species grows up.
Okay,
they're waiting for us to grow up. Yeah.
I'm glad you're talking about contact and the type of contact. I wanted to ask you something before I ask you another question, and that is, you mentioned CE5 contact. I'm going to make a statement here, and then I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, and that is the CE4 category was not explicitly approved by Dr. HYNEK, but is in wide use. Also, the CE5 category was added and created by Dr. Greer from the Sea SETI organization. The CE5 is a term describing a fifth category of close encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence characterized by mutual bilateral communication rather than unilateral contact. Is that all correct?
Yeah, and that's great. That's great, yes.
Okay.
Yes, because, yes.
Well, I also wanted to make a statement about you and then ask you about it. My understanding from the many years that you have been deeply involved in dedicating your life to the topic of ufology and also to remote viewing now, I wanted to know, at what point did you start connecting the dots between ufology and consciousness? Because I know you didn't necessarily start out that way.
2 years ago, but I'm not the only one. So did Grant Cameron. So did Colin Andrews. The three of us. Colin Andrews wrote a book called The Edge of Reality. It's all on consciousness. Grant Cameron went from presidential UFO to consciousness. He's at my conference every year because he goes to consciousness. It's the bottom line. It's like Chant. It's like the graduate school. I can't go back to third grade. I don't want to play around in third and fourth grade anymore. It's been 30 to 40 years now, and the messages from Latin America, the messages from the giant rock people, all of that was, just watch the Day the Earth Stood Still, the speech that Klaatu makes at the end about this species better grow up, otherwise they will not be allowed to be part of a federation of cosmic peoples. And logically, because I dealt, when I was in Italy, I dealt with Monsignor Corrado Balducci, who was a good friend. Logically, God just didn't create humans on this planet. He created humans all over the place. And all over planets we can't even see. The ones from Latin America, and I want to recommend this book, Contact from Planet Apu by Ricardo Gonzalez. It's talking about the spacemen coming off the ships. And Ricardo's from Argentina, but grew up in Peru. The spacemen with the ecological messages, and the messages they're coming off the ships with right now, who say they're related to us, and they're in the constellation of Alpha Centauri. So logically, there's people all over the place. And some of them are more advanced and want us to grow up. So that the definition of consciousness that I have is, a feeling of being awake and aware of everything. So that was only 2 years ago.
Okay, and I wanted to make a comment about two books you referenced so folks can know a little bit more about them. One is an iconic book that's highly recommended that people read to know more about the topics we're discussing here. And more. It's called The Edge of Reality, which Paola mentioned. It's a legendary book, which was written by Dr. Alan HYNEK and Dr. Jacques Vallée.
No, that's not the one.
Which one are you talking?
The Edge of Reality by Colin Andrews.
Okay, let me look that up real quick.
The Edge of Reality was he wrote it, but I mentioned Colin Andrews. He's a crop circle researcher. HYNEK wrote The Edge of Reality, I think, with Jacques Vallée. So, because Jacques Vallée believes it's all paranormal, that a lot of this is paranormal.
Right, he has his own
but
hypothesis.
The Edge of Reality, is when Colin Andrews had his change of heart, because he had a Colin, he lives in Connecticut. In fact, you might want to interview him. He's amazing. And he wrote The Edge of Reality and realized the crop circle phenomenon was people's consciousness, even the fake ones, creating the crop circle, which is amazing.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And then the other one is going to be, I talk about consciousness in my last book, All of the Above and Beyond, but The other one is Grant Cameron. Grant Cameron wrote about consciousness in his last books. He's written 4 books now, and he's looking at ESP, talking to the contactees. He used to be just presidential UFO. He used to just do presidents. So Colin Andrews, and the other person is Stephen Greer. My God, the Unacknowledged book, his Hidden Truth book. He's always been into consciousness. Stephen Greer's always been into it.
So Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge is the Greer book.
Yeah.
Full title.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and restate that book again. It's actually a very long title, but it's definitely worth the read. It's called On the Edge of Reality, Hidden Technology, Powers of the Mind, Quantum Physics, Paranormal Phenomena, Orbs, UFOs, Harmonic Transmissions, and Crop Circles by Colin Andrews and Cynthia Andrews. The other book that you mentioned was called UFO Contact from Planet Iarga. Is that how I pronounce it?
No, you're talking about the time travel book, the Contact from Apu by Ricardo Gonzalez.
Oh, from Apus. Okay, let me go ahead and look that up.
APU.
Got it.
That'll. By the way, that'll blow you away. That'll change your mind about everything. That book is Contact from Apu, because Ricardo goes all over the world to meet with these time travelers who are telling him what's happening, and Ricardo himself is doing a retreat in Crestone, Colorado in August. And he was at my conference last year. And when Ricardo Gonzalez speaks, the room empties. When he goes out of the room, everybody follows him. He's a contactee that has contact with space people. Not, I'm trying to get away from this little gray alien thing. From space people that have real messages who say they care about us. And, that changed my whole view. And I've been to Colombia. I've been to the Atacama Desert with Ricardo. I've been to Argentina. And I'm going back to Peru in May because I don't work in the United States very much, Chant, anymore, because it's all one type of ufology.
Right. Now, I wanted to go back to the consciousness thing again, and thank you very much for having corrected me on the books, and because it's important that the people who are listening to this interview get the privilege of being able to read these incredible books that connect what we're talking about and how important consciousness is to the topic of ufology. Regarding how you encountered the thought process of marrying ufology and consciousness together, you said was a couple years ago for you. Was it remote viewing? Was that one of the reasons that allowed you to start looking more at consciousness?
I wish I could say yes, Chan, but I never stopped long enough to meditate. I mean, I wish I could say I did all these things. No. It was when I interviewed the 10 Latin American contactees that I changed everything.
Okay. And I did want to cover that.
It's the night, and I thought, oh my God, we're really living in La La Land here in America. And I had also contacted and talked to the people in Italy about the friendship amicizia case that I would like to send you. You know that one. I'd like to send you the link on that, if that's okay.
Can you pronounce that again? Is it
called friendship? Amicizia. It's in Italian, but it's called friendship. You could look at a friendship case. Friendship.
Right. Yeah, no, I knew about it. I just didn't know how to pronounce it properly. I was going to ask you about that because
you don't know how to pronounce friendship.
No. No, those guys, that was a case that happened in 1956 for 10 years, again in the 50s. And I went personally to interview everybody that survived that. In other words, the people that are still living, that were part of that community with the ETs on the, city of Pescara, Italy, near the Adriatic Sea. There's only like 5 still alive, and they're in their 90s. So I went to talk to them about what the ETs were saying, what they wanted, what the messages were, and I interviewed them personally, and that was 2 years ago. That's one of the reasons that made me change, because I was not only in Latin America, I was realizing that these ETs are walking among us. And I was going,
And and so you were able to communicate with both short and tall ETs, and were some or one of them called Antarelles?
No, that Untitled is Ricardo Gonzalez.
Okay.
And that is contacts from Apu. And that is, they are Apunians. And they live in a base in Peru. Okay. And that is that's Latin America. The ones of the friendship case are called W56s because the Italians didn't know what to call them. And it was 1956. The book written about that is called Mass Contacts by Stefano Breccia. Mass Contacts. They can get it on Amazon. I helped Stefano translate it into English because I wanted everybody to know about it, because ufology is not American. It's universal. And I helped him translate that. And then he gave me, he's since died, the voices of these beings talking to the Italians, the voices of them talking in Italian to the Italians. And I realized that there had been an advancement in contact. It's not abduction, it's contact in other countries, and that it was my job to get the books translated and to tell the world who wants to study this. So I'm going to send you the link for the friendship case. Remember, that's Italy. And then I want to send you probably a picture, I'll do it today, of Ricardo Gonzalez's book with Untitled. Now, I don't have time to talk about this, but I saw Untitled in Shasta in 2014 physically.
Right, we had wanted to ask you about that.
It's very private. I was not alone. I was with 7 people, and it caused me to have post-traumatic stress because it's like seeing a ghost. It's not anything that he was standing next to a tree. He was 10 foot tall. He was talking in a language that I didn't understand. I was right next to 2 Spanish women. Everybody was speaking Spanish in Shasta because it was Ricardo does everything in Spanish. So it wasn't Spanish this man was speaking. I don't know what he was speaking. And he was speaking to me. He had a hoodie on. He was 10 foot tall. I heard what he was saying. It was like an echo. And at the very end, in English, and I thought I was going nuts, he said in a robotic voice, "Thank you," in English, turns around and walks back into the forest.
Was he holographic like?
No, he was physical. He was physical. No, I could hear the crunching of the leaves on his boots. No, he was not that time. The year later, he was in a hologram.
And so he turned around and walked back.
Yeah, everybody saw him. Yeah, there was 2 people in front of me, and I was standing in a line with 3 people. The weird part about that is when Ricardo came to me, when he invited me to Shasta, he said, I said, no, because I don't camp. I hate camping, and I hate being cold. And I didn't realize, I didn't realize they were fasting. So I had like 1 apple I cut in 16 pieces to try to last for 3 days.
Oh, my gosh.
So I'm going, oh, my God, they didn't tell me they were fasting. And you know me. So when the thing was over Friday night, I couldn't wait to get food. I was going, I'm going to a restaurant. I can't, this is wonderful. Meditation for 3 days is wonderful. He comes down and he kneels down and he said, "Paola, Antarell is in the forest. Do you think you can handle it?" Do you remember those words? Do you remember if you can handle it? The Colonel Corso words.
There you go.
So, there you go. And I said, I didn't know what to say because I didn't believe it. Like I'm going, are you kidding? I'm going to go down in the dark there. Can't even use a flashlight. He had me hold hands with 2 other women. But, that's what happened. And I said yes. So Chant, everybody that asks you anything, say yes. That's the
moral of the story. Okay.
Yes.
So the Rama group, is there anything that you can say about that?
Oh, they're not Rama. They are not Rama.
But
and Ricardo does not deal with Rama. Rama belongs to Sisto Paz, and Sisto and Charlie, and I interviewed both Charlie and Sisto because they were the young men in the Chilca Desert that went aboard the ship with 7 other young men. So they have all each other to verify their stories. They went aboard ships with these space people. They started Rama, and Ricardo is not Rama or any part of Rama. So if you want to read, it's not. No, he doesn't. He has his own group, and his group is connected with Nicholas Roerich, who is a Russian mystic who designed the first peace flag for the League of Nations, which is the United Nations today. Nicholas Roerich was a painter and lived in India. So Ricardo goes back to Altai, India. He goes to India, I don't know how many times, so he's more for world peace. So I support that world peace movement much more because the message along the board, everybody's message, even the Amici is, you guys better unite in order to survive on this planet. So that means peace. It means inner peace before outer peace. But that's why I support the Roerich movement, the peace movement, that white flag with the 3 dots that you see on my Facebook all the time.
Okay. There's a lot to cover here. We'll try and do it in as short amount of time as possible. But you started out talking about certain extraterrestrials you have come in contact with. Were they short and tall ETs? Is that correct?
I've never come in contact with.
Well, I'm sorry. There was let me rephrase that. I apologize. It's a group I cannot pronounce. It's the Italian group, the friendship group.
Oh, the W56s.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, they came in contact with a variety of extraterrestrials. Were they both short and tall ETs? And also, what kind
people? They were not grays.
Right. Okay.
They were people.
They were people. Got it. Could they cloak and bend light, change their frequency? Could they come and go? How could one describe these people?
Okay, these people said they were doing an experiment. And it wasn't just in Pescara, Italy. There's a friendship case in Chile, if you study this, also in Chile. And they said, we can live among you people. We'll live among you. In fact, Bruno Samachicha, that put those guys in a castle, physically, they're physical people, like Antarella's physical person. He put them in a castle, and he also was in charge of bringing huge truckloads of fruits and vegetables, because they're vegetarian, to eat. So they got together with 10 Italians, and I'm going to give you the link so everybody can look at it. And they said, we'll live among you as long as you guys don't fight among yourselves. And they said, we have different kinds of ETs in this group. People, space people. And they said, we have a technology called Ureda, which means harmony. And if you guys can't keep harmony, we got to leave. Well, it lasted 10 years, and then they started to fight among each other. So when I interviewed Gaspare Di Lama and his wife, who were part of those 10 Italians, they gave me a manifesto that was one of the ETs had given them about staying united and having a common purpose. That's on my YouTube channel. If people can go to that, I had to go to Lake Como, where George Clooney lives, to interview that Gaspare Di Lama. So that's on YouTube. You can see him showing me what the ET had written about staying together. And that on my YouTube channel are the interviews with the South Americans, word for word. I'm sitting in front of them, and they're telling me what happened. So that might help a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much for having answered that, Paula. I appreciate that. Is there any more that you would like to say about Mount Shasta in general?
Well, everybody in the world goes there. Like everybody is
yeah, I hear a lot about it. I hear a lot of stories about Mount Shasta. I just want to know if maybe you wanted to share anything about that.
Well, it's become New Age capital of the world. So, I don't want to go back there necessarily, because there's everybody and his brother is there, and they're doing all kinds of different things. I went there in 2014 and 15 because I was asked to go back in the forest there. And the when I went back in 2015, you're really good because you're making me say this. When I went back in 2015, I saw Untitled and two others in holographic form, and I freaked out. I freaked myself out so badly I was shaking. I just couldn't deal with it. But the message that I got was, if you will lead, we will match your efforts, which means the ETs will help if somebody cares. In other words, they will step in and help. I don't think they'll ever let this planet blow up. But if somebody cares, and somebody has to care, they don't just hang out there. And that was the message I got. So my job is just to record it for history. I have no hope there's going to be any legitimate disclosure, because it's all in the hands of, the latest flavor of ice cream. I don't know what to say, but it's all in the hands of whoever's using the technology and whatever. And I just want to record what everybody said, so that whoever studies this, and you're really a great student, Chant. Whoever studies this can figure it out for themselves. They can figure it out. They're not stupid. They read everything. They put it together. For me, Jacques Vallée's books are the best. And his books are called Forbidden Science, Volume 1, 2, and 3, and he's coming out with Volume 4. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a statement, and then I wanted to ask you about something. I happen to agree with you about there not being legitimate disclosure going on right now at all. I wanted to talk about ETs in the ocean, mountains of Italy, ETs in the ocean, underground, all around the world. Also, with regards to portals, are there any statements you'd like to make about that topic?
Well, I had a hard time with the ETs underwater, because the W-56s had an underwater base. And then when I'm talking to the fishermen there, they're telling me these tunnels of water coming up, and they refuse to go out and fish on the Adriatic coast. So there was an underwater base in the Adriatic Sea. But it's not what we picture it. It's another dimension. It is another dimension. And a portal is another dimension. And I'm not. I don't know where those are, but I think somebody wants to know where they all are. I think that Shasta, probably the mountain itself, may have some kind of mystical base. I know the Apunians have their base on Huascaran, which is a very, 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 very tall mountain in Peru in the Andes, and it's normal for them. And maybe you just you don't dig away. Maybe it's just another dimension. But in order to understand this, read Jacques' books, because he talks about dimensionality and other dimensions simultaneously. And it's hard for us because we're locked into a time-space dimension. We got to touch it and feel it and all this kind of stuff. And that's not the way reality is.
I'm glad you're bringing. I'm glad you're bringing up the topic of dimensions, because I just wanted to interrupt you. I apologize for interrupting, but just to make a statement, and I hope maybe you would make a comment about it, and that is interdimensional and extra-dimensional and ET contact are all different. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's all real. Like somebody always says to me, are they interplanetary or interdimensional or like ghosts? And I say it's all of it. It's all real. That's the reality. What we're living right now is not.
But those terms delineate from one another very clearly, right? They are being interdimensional and then extra-dimensional, two different things, correct?
Yeah.
And
I mean, interdimensional, they can step, because reality, we're in an illusion of everything. And I really hope you interview Colin Andrews, because Colin Andrews and I are almost the same age, and he's figured it out because he was in the crop circle thing. And he said to me, Paula, he said, would you believe that even the fake crop circle makers would get the idea from somewhere, and they wouldn't finish the crop circle, and they'd wake up and it was finished by something? And I'm going, you're kidding. And he goes, yeah, and that makes it valid, because they didn't finish it the night before. They wake up and finish. Something else is finishing it, and we're dealing with something else. And Jacques is amazing, because he talks about the something else. he doesn't call it anything, but I've come to the conclusion anymore that it's the something else more than, even though I know there's interplanetary travelers like the Apunians from Apu in Alpha Centauri, even though I know they're real and they're physical, there's also this other component that is so weird. Talk about weird science, that people need to understand that too.
I wonder if people who are involved in ufology as serious researchers come to the conclusion that they will eventually connect consciousness to this topic. So we've covered a little bit regarding crop circles. I think you may have even mentioned orbs, I'm not sure. But then also remote viewing. I wanted to ask you, why remote viewing for you? Why does remote viewing matter to you? It matters to me. I'm just letting you know that now. It matters deeply.
Then I hope to see you in November, because it took, because they're all there. I mean, everybody that was working with that, Russell Targ with SRI, they were working. They were using it for military purposes, like Colonel Corso said, everything's to find out what Russia had. But I'm very close friends with Uri Geller. And Uri and I, when I was in Europe, I saw him a lot. And he's going to Skype in. And remote viewing is a way of seeing other dimensions. I mean, remote viewing is also the ESP component. It's a direct thought transfer. Psychics use ESP when they do readings, when they do future projections. They eliminate the time element, which is such a blockage. So an ET that's going to speak to Colonel Corso is not necessarily going to speak to him in his language. The ET didn't go to school. So what he's doing, and Colonel Corso said that he was wearing was an interface, which means a direct thought transfer. When I think something, it's going in your brain. It doesnit matter what language it is. It's direct thought transfer. I mean, logically, if these people are getting messages from all over the place, it has to be a technology that has direct thought transfer. I'm fascinated with that. So we're going to talk about consciousness. So I'm Nick Pope coming, and he's going to talk about the remote viewing program. I'm going to talk about, for the first time ever, the Michael Wolff Cruvant case, Catchers of Heaven, because I was the only journalist to go and visit him in Hartford. And he was remote viewer for the CIA, for the government, and also had a lot of weird paranormal contact stuff around him. So it's just new research, and it's bringing all the people together, and it's a dialogue. And as I said at the beginning of this program, I really love the idea of studying this like an academic subject. And I hope to see you there, because you'll enjoy speaking to the people.
Yeah, I look forward to doing whatever I can to go to that important conference. By the way, you mentioned Michael Wolff and the alien. I wanted to ask you about the alien incident. Do you have anything to say about that?
The alien incident?
Yeah, I was just curious that there was some research I had been doing, and I came across that.
You mean when I went to interview Michael Wolff and we had all that interference?
Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Oh, my God.
You don't
that was the first time. I wasn't alone, so thank God I'm not alone, because I freaked myself out 2 minutes. I wasn't alone. I went to visit Michael Wolff with to get his statement with Adriano Sorgione, who is my boss now in Italy. I write for X Times magazine. This was years ago, so Adriano was very young, and he and I shared a hotel room to save money. We went to see Michael Wolff. We were with him all day. We saw documents. We saw photos of him. He played a double agent. He was a double agent, so he was with Fellini, played an actor in 8½. So we saw all the photographs of him in 8½. We were there a whole day. I'm walking out of his apartment with Adriano, and I hear all these dolphin sounds. And I said, Adriano, what's going on? I said, these sound like dolphins. And he said, well, probably elevator is rusty and squeaky and whatever. And we got in the elevator, and it was loud. And then we left the building, and it was gone. That night at 3 a.m, I wake up and look out in the window, and something is coming in the window that has some kind of spiral, this royal blue spiral. And I'm going, uh-oh, something's coming in the window. And Adriano from the other side of the room screaming and yelling, Paula, I hear a voice. And he heard a female robotic voice in his head saying, you are soul, like a S-O-U-L. And he kept the lights on all night. And Wolf called us the next day and said, why aren't you here? And we said, we freaked out because all of this is happening. And he goes, well, he said, I sent my friends to visit you. Didn't you see they walked out with you from my apartment? He said, because they're trying to understand human love. And I'm thinking, no, I didn't see anything. But, man, did I hear dolphin sounds, like crazy. And then, and I read Courtney Brown's book on remote viewing, and he said that the chirping sounds are often, the dolphin sounds. And Michael Wolff's original contact was a little gray called Colta. If you read Catches of Heaven, which is very difficult, Colta's photograph is on the front cover, and the human alien on the back cover, and that's Sarah, the blonde that he was working with the government to interface with. So that was the first time, and thank God I wasn't alone. And so Adriano's willing to talk about that, because that really did happen. We did do the story. We did print the story. It was wonderful because I got to see him 2 more times after that before he died. He was an amazing man, Michael Wolff Cravat.
Thank you for that story, Paula. I wanted to ask you about Clifford Stone and the Holloman Air Force Base film that was at his house when you visited.
My God, you did a lot of research.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, well, that happened because I didn't know what I was doing. And when I went to see Corso in 1945, when it was 50th anniversary, I was trying to get to see Corso and everything. But then Clifford Stone, whom I had never met, came up to me and said, I have stuff in my apartment that you researchers should see. And I looked at another researcher, Vittorio Paccaccini from Brazil. We're international researchers, right? Nobody came to his house. Nobody. Just Paccaccini and me, Italy and Brazil. We went to his house. And I had a movie camera, and I was supposed to report back to my boss. So I started filming it, and Clifford comes out and throws all this microfilm in this canister on the, on the coffee table. So my job is just to, I don't know what I'm looking at. So I'm just filming everything. And I sent it back to Maurizio, my boss in Italy, FedEx, and he goes, you know what you just filmed? He said, that's at Holloman Landing. It was, that canister that was right there. Why didn't you ask to see it? So I called Clifford and I said, why didn't you tell me? And he said, what the intelligence community said was that the real researchers will never come over my house, that they really don't care about the truth, that if somebody asks you to see it, you show it to them, that it's the first 8 minutes of the meeting of these beings, and they were not gray, they were Semitic looking. If people want to know what happened at Holloman, go see the film. It Has Begun by Emma Nager. It's got Jacques Vallée and the Twilight Zone guy, Rod Serling, and they portray what's on the first 8 minutes of that film. And I said, Clifford, I didn't ask because I didn't know what it was. And he goes, well, I had to give it back to him the next day because they were right. None of the researchers came over. I filmed it, but I didn't know what it was, so I'm not going to ask him. And then I learned, it took me a long time to figure anything out because nobody told me. I didn't go to school for this. Mm-hmm. So do I feel bad? Yeah, because if I had asked, he would have shown it to me. That was the instructions that Clifford Stone got. If anybody asks you, show them the first 8 minutes of this landing.
I wanted to ask you about the people that you brought to Rome on your own money. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I brought Jesse Marcel Jr. The people thought they loved him because Jesse Marcel Jr. was a 9-year-old that, touched all the fragments. His dad brought him in that night. And if it was a weather balloon, he certainly isn't going to bring fragments to his wife and kid to touch. He told Jesse that this was something from another world. And Jesse explained to me that it was all over the kitchen table, and there wasn't just one I-beam. There was like 4 I-beams or more. And so I had him and his family, and then I had Dr. John Mack, and I took Dr. John Mack to speak in Florence. He was amazing. He spoke with young people. He loved young people. Probably the man that I loved the most, when we were working is Dr. Mack. He was very present. He was very intellectual. He was very kind, and he changed his mind so many times that I talked about contact as contact. And then Ryan Wood, who has the book MJ, it's called Eyes Only. It has 93 crashes, and that's where I saw the one on San Antonio. I brought Ryan Wood. I brought over Russell Targ several times. Linda Howe spoke for us. Richard Dolan and his family. Paul Davids, was the director of the movie Roswell. So many. I can't remember them all. Who came, and they all stayed in my apartment. Travis Walton twice. So they all slept in my bedroom. So just like George Washington has the bed that everybody slept in, that I have that too. Robert Dean, at least twice. Good grief, just so many. And therefore, I got to be personal friends and could talk to them about the real situation.
Yes. Thank you very much for answering those questions. I wanted to ask you something that it might be a little emotional, but I'll ask nonetheless. How do you feel the topic of ufology may have possibly destroyed your career as a teacher in Rome, if that did occur?
Well, all of us that I've ever talked to that have done this work, including poor Ricardo Gonzalez, that was a pharmaceutical representative. You can't be involved in this. And, he got fired. I mean, what had happened to me is I ended my career because, and it was a natural ending, because I was replaced with a first-year teacher after 15 years, and it forced me to confront the educational system. I was told from day one, do not talk about this ever in the classroom, but kids aren't stupid. They saw the website, and I never did talk about it in the classroom, but if they wanted to go to McDonald's in Rome, I talked to them about it, because young people are really, really interested. What freaks young people about it is that it's real. I mean, here I am dealing with an astronomer. I mean, it's real. I'm not talking to people that are making things up or whatever. They have backgrounds. And I think, Chant, what really happened was that whoever is guiding my career didn't want me doing that anymore. They basically wanted me to go out in the field. And of course, I can't do that when I have a full-time job. So when that all, when I ended my career there in, I think it was 2005, I was invited to speak in Canada with Paul Hellyer, and I became ill, so I couldn't go. And it was Paul Hellyer coming out with Stanton Friedman, Richard Dolan, and Steve Bassett. And it was University of Toronto, and I was supposed to be the woman. I'm always the token woman everywhere. So that happened in Barcelona too. I was with 9 men.
That's why I brought on Chant. We needed a token woman here.
Yes, we need more females in this field.
But that's the problem, is that they don't take you seriously.
No, I know.
Like I'm going, okay, I'm looking at this, and you don't understand that this, for me as an educator, if I have a master, that's how I think as an educator. This is serious business. So I then figured out that whoever it is that's guiding this research didn't want me working full time. So I flew to Canada on my own dime after I became well, and I interviewed Paul Hellyer, and it went viral. And I interviewed him in his office, and you could see the CN Tower. But, that started my career, is going all over the world interviewing people, because I believe that people should that's why I want them to go to the YouTube channel, decide for themselves. And for me, Paul Hellyer is the hero. But everybody that was sitting there didn't pay attention to him. And I'm going, why? Because Paul Hellyer said that Colonel Corso's book convinced him, and he had called a general in the United States to verify CORSO. And the general said to him the CORSO was telling the truth and more. He added, and more. So, that's why Paul used the famous phrase, and he's Minister of Defense like McNamara was in the same period of time. He said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes overhead. Can you tell me what more disclosure you want than that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What else do you want? I mean, this is the Minister of Defense. He's not nuts.
Right.
I mean, this is what, him and all the other military people, the Disclosure Project with Stephen Greer in 2009. I went to the citizen hearing with 36 generals from South America. Pinati was there, Frank. And, people from England and all over, and they're testifying in front of these Congress people.
Yeah, our friend Alex Giannetti was there, too.
Yeah. So what else do you want? I mean, what is it, entertainment? You just want the next flavor of ice cream? I mean, it's real. The generals in South America were freaked out. They can't control their air. They can't control the airports there. The military airports, because UFOs are flying over them. And by the way, the UFOs are not on vacation, so they're looking at possible conflict. Yeah, I mean, what are they, just flying over these military airports because they have nothing better to do? I mean, people aren't using their brain.
Yeah. You mentioned just very slightly about females in ufology. I deal with it on a regular. Regarding people, not everybody, but certain individuals who might treat me indifferently because I am female. I know you've had decades of more research on me in this field and wanted to know, have you dealt with it in a manner that you felt was extremely negative?
Oh, yeah. In the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Frank asked me about the CUN, Centro Ufologico Nazionale, and I'd come in and I'd give a lecture on Richard Hoagland because I spent 3 weeks at his house talking about Mars. And they turned around to each other and said, how did she get in there? How did she go to Hoagland's house? And the reason was because Richard Hoagland invited me to his house, and he would ask me to read. He'd say, you're a guest here. I want you to read all these books I'm giving you. And I'd have to go to my room and read. Mm-hmm. And what did they think I was doing there? Right. I mean, and then he gave me the story, and then I would tell the Italians, and unfortunately, it's the old boys club. It's what I call the old boys club. Whether it's in Italy with that, or it was MUFON, APRO, CUFOS. When I went to work for CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, with Alan HYNEK, there was APRO, Area Phenomenon Research Organization. I'm very close to MUFON. I love Jan Harzan, but there's, very few women. So you've got all these older guys who, they're back to the old days, and they do an amazing job. But what we need is young people, and we need more serious researchers that that read the materials or go all over the world and interview people. I mean, we need that kind of stuff. And it takes money, Chant. I mean, I could give you the names of all the people that you could interview that you've mentioned to me, but you've got to fly there. You've got to stay in a hotel, and it takes money. And I'm convinced that's one of the reasons why a lot of the guys I've been with say, I'm not going to spend my money on this stuff. You're nuts. You spend all your money. And my kids are going, you could go to the Caribbean, Mom, on sandals and lie on the beach in your old age. Why the heck are you doing this?
Yeah. Right. Well, and
why am I doing this? Because I don't have a choice. Anybody that you speak to that is a serious researcher is driven because they don't have a choice.
I agree with you on that. I feel driven every day. I study this day and night. And by the way, you mentioned somebody who is a really wonderful person by the name of Jan Harzan, ex-executive director of MUFON, and I interviewed him twice. Frank and I actually interviewed him recently. He's a wonderful person, and we thoroughly enjoyed having had the privilege of interviewing him.
Oh, I love him. But there again, Jan worked for IBM. So why is Jan doing this? Because he had a sighting. Mm-hmm. And it changes your life. I mean, I didn't get involved till I was 32.
Yeah,
because I watched a movie.
Oh, I want to come back to that, but there's only two people, to my knowledge, in MUFON that make money, and I'll explain that in a moment. And that is his personal secretary, and then himself. They receive a salary. It's a pittance. It's not hardly anything. They don't make any money at all off of this topic. I want to make that clear. But regarding the movie that you saw, which one was it?
Regarding the what?
That you mentioned a movie that you saw that you felt was influential.
Oh, Close Encounters. I mean, Close Encounters, if I watch it today, it makes me cry.
Yeah, and
I cry at the end. I mean, I'm crying my eyes out, and I'm going, why?
I'm glad you mentioned that.
You didn't have anything happen. Yeah.
Dr. Alan HYNEK said on an interview that it was an interview Frank pointed out to me to listen to. The interviewer mentioned that movie, and HYNEK said something to the effect of the $18 million movie with the $1,000 title, because that's all he got for that movie.
I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure though that's true.
He did say that in his interview.
Sure that's true.
Right.
Yeah. No.
He said that anecdotally.
His voice?
Oh no, that was him.
His voice say that?
Yeah. No, he was being interviewed.
His voice said that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. He coined the phrase, fourth kind, third kind, and so forth. But in the end, the problem, even with people not, the UFO community in general not getting together, is the money. It's like who gets more money than who, and all the money people and all that. I can't look at that. I have to, as a professor or a teacher, I want to know, and that's my motivation. I want to know. I'll do what I can for instance, I sponsored the Laughlin Conference, and I've had to refinance my house 3 times. It's coming out of my pocket. And the people aren't, we have 300 people, but you get other conferences that have abductions, experiencers, and all that, and they have thousands of people. And I'm going, okay, no, I'm trying to change the paradigm. I want you to know what the real story is with SRI, with Nick Pope, talking about their documents, with all the people involved. I want us to, in the end, see that this is not entertainment. What this is an effort to bring the history together so that the humanity can unite in some way. If there are cosmic cultures that want to give a hand, as Untitled said, if you will lead, we'll match your efforts. They can't do it if they're individually caught up in a movie star status. Mm-hmm. They have to do it to come together, like Ricardo Gonzalez is doing in Crestone on August.
Yes,
everybody
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, well, I was a consultant and did the movie Sirius with Stephen Greer, and I also was a consultant for Unacknowledged with Stephen Greer. And at the end of the 6 days, and we saw UFOs. But we were totally quiet. It was not a circus. It was an effort. Stephen does the puja ceremony in Sanskrit. He recites it. Now, at that time, because of the movie, we had 9-box cameras on trees and everything. And the stuff that was over our heads when he was doing the puja ceremony, one of the photos has this huge angel with wings. Other photos have light beings as we're in that circle. And these are not things you could see with the naked eye. So I fell in love with Crestone from that movie, and I bought 5 acres of land. Because to get to Crestone's a real challenge. There's nothing there. It's like in the middle of nowhere in southern Colorado. So I realized that if people want to communicate, you can see the whole Milky Way, every single star in the sky. There's no light pollution. And the whole story of Crestone is that it was an experiment where all the religions lived together, because there's like 5 ashrams, the Carmelite nuns, Shumei, the Zen Center, and it is an experiment. And it was made by Canadian Hannah Strong and her husband Maurice Strong. They had money from Lawrence Rockefeller to create Crestone, which people don't know this, but it's a special spot. So for me to have 5 acres of land, to invite Ricardo to speak about, the messages and world peace, is something that I would rather do than appear on television, appear on any TV program, promote my career or anything. To me, it's a lot of satisfaction to be there with all these people in unison under the stars.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the event at Crestone, but first, if you don't mind, I wanted to mention some filmography you have been involved in. Is that okay?
Some what?
Some films.
Photography?
A filmography that you've been involved in. How about I start listing them off, and you can tell me if you're involved with them. That is Open Minds. Is that correct? Beyond Belief with George Norrie.
Beyond Belief, yes.
George Norrie,
okay.
E.T.'s Among
Meredith.
Us. Okay, I just mentioned the list here. E.T.'s Among Us, UFO Witnesses and Whistleblowers. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I don't remember who did it. Who did that?
Right. Then there's UFOs and International Perspective. Yeah,
these are all talks I did. The videography stuff. These are videography stuff. The films were Safe Space. You mentioned it because I brought Monsignor Balducci to Washington, and I'm with Balducci translating. That's Robert Miles' Safe Space. I did that. I was a consultant on Unacknowledged and Sirius. Sirius changed my life. 6 days out in the wilderness, my God. And with Stephen Greer, at the end, Stephen says to me, at the very end, he doesn't want to go, and he looks at me and he goes, "Why would you want to do anything else?" And I'm thinking, my God, yeah, just look up at the stars. Why would I want to do anything else? And you're addicted to doing it. Like everybody's yelling and screaming and, take us and all the circus atmosphere. It has to be total. Yep. So it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, Paula, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah. Now, I think somebody was trying to call. That's why. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine again.
I'm breaking up?
No, we can hear you right now. Yeah, we can hear you right now. And then also, did you do a documentary called Fast Walkers?
Yeah, that was Safe Space. That's what it was called. Safe Space.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then is there The Day Before Disclosure?
Yeah, that was I think Terj from Norway, and he asked me about all the people I had interviewed, and he couldn't believe I was all over the place. It's like he couldn't believe I talked to all those people. But yeah, that's a good one because I just recount what everybody said.
Right, that was done in 2010, and then I have another one that's called The Conspiracy Show with Richard Surrett.
Well, that's a radio show from Canada.
Okay, about the secret space program, is that right?
Yeah, but I don't know anything about it. The Germans did a secret space program, but that also, I don't want to make any comments on that. Germans did, and there is a secret space program of some kind, but I'm not sure we know all the details of that.
Okay,
the guy that I will tell you this, that when I went to MUFON, to their conference in July, they had Gary McKinnon on, who was the one that found all the astronauts, the space astronauts. He's amazing. People should be talking to him. They threatened his life. If they threatened his life, then nobody's going on a television show episode after episode. McKinnon was so freaked out when they came after him that he had a cyanide pill ready to commit suicide. If you're involved in these programs, really, and nobody wants you to talk, you're not going to talk. And I was just blown away with Gary McKinnon. My God, he talked for MUFON at that conference, and I taped him, but he's the real deal.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning that. Back to your event at Crestone, which is it true that you're hosting that in the summer? Is that right?
Yeah, August 23rd to 25th. The first 100 people that sign up, they can go on the www.starworksusa.com website, and I'm not involved. It's Ricardo who's going to do it. We have an interpreter who will interpret, because he's going to speak in Spanish, and the interpreter, he speaks pretty good English, but we have an interpreter for him, and it's 3 days out in Crestone.
Okay. And can you mention all the conferences that you will be doing this year aside from Crestone and the one in November? Are there more?
Yeah, I'm on my way to the Consciousness Life Expo.
Okay.
And I'm going to be interviewing Emery Smith on stage on the second day. And people should look into Emery Smith. He's with Gaia TV, and he is an insider. And I am going to be doing a lecture at IONS in Petaluma on the 12th of February. Then I'm going to Peru for a month with a camera crew to look at the contacts of the 70s. And then I'm going with Regina Meredith in May to the island of Sardinia off Italy. Hardly anybody goes to that island, but they have these 15-foot tall, they have 15-foot long tombs, and they have giant bones of giants. So Gaia is doing a special. I'm going with Regina Meredith there, and my boss, Adriano Forgione. We're going to be on that island. And then I'm coming back and doing Alien Con on what's his name, Alan HYNEK, with Paul HYNEK, his son. I'm going to go to the MUFON conference because I support MUFON 150% in July. And then I'm speaking Canada and Toronto at their MUFON conference. And then there's mine, and in November, where I'm bringing all these people together to talk about UFOs, remote viewing, and communication with ETs.
Okay. And how do people find out more about that one?
That's on my website, Paola Harris, Paola Harris.com, and on StarWorks. Right now, we're getting a special. Anybody that signs up, they get a free remote viewing class from Sean McNamara, and that is really a treat. Remote viewing, actually, that's just the ability to see and to understand your environment. I mean, can you imagine if you could remote view your car keys if you lose them? I mean, you don't have to do military remote viewing. It's developing your ESP, for God's sakes. I mean, you could feel. Remote viewing is you could feel people, if they're going to be your friend or enemy. I mean, these talents are very important in everyday life. It's not just, weirdness.
Yeah, Paula, have you ever used remote viewing as part of your research to generate leads or clear anything up any questions you might have had in your own mind?
No, Frank, I'm terrible. I never stop 2 minutes. I'm terrible. I mean, the only way that I will do meditation is if you drag me out to Crestone and then sit there for an hour and a half.
You're fading again, unfortunately.
I said, you have to drag me out into the wilderness and let me meditate. That's the only time I quiet my mind.
Got it. Okay.
I wanted to ask you about Bruce Maccabee. Do you ever have any contact with him, Paula?
No, he was at the X conferences that I spoke at with Steve Bassett invited me to speak at 5X conferences. But what I do know about him is that he researched the Gulf Breeze case, which I support.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I went to Gulf Breeze. I was invited to speak there, and I went to the school where there was the mark of the the craft landed. And what happens with all these poor, contactees like Ed Walters is they, just like with Colonel Corso, our own people bash them so much they give up and they just leave.
Yes.
To go underground. And so I know that Bruce Maccabee worked on that. I've read the books and I talked to the people there, and that was a real case, but it's gone. Because our own people go after these people, and they say, "Oh no!" Like Billy, the most famous is Billy Meyer. I mean, I've been to Italy. I saw Billy Meyer. I talked to the people. The Japanese came and bought everything, including the piece of craft that was the metal that Meyer had. So everybody else bashes that case. It's over. Nobody's going to go there. And I talked to the townspeople, saw the photos. By the way, Photoshop was not invented until 1992. And those photos were 1970s, so nobody's even using their brain. And that case, I believe, is totally real. But we've just dismissed all these cases because somebody comes and, they're going to holler hoax without doing any real research. They're going to holler hoax for everything. Every single. Antonio Uzzi, who's a case in Italy that takes incredible movies of metal UFOs. I've known him for 25 years, and I was in Mexico City when he pointed one out to me. And the Mexican, television came out and filmed it. He's a contactee that somehow they fly over his place. They're telling me those are metal buttons and all these. People are crazy. I mean, I've known Antonio for 20 years, and before everybody even heard of him and saw his films. Some of these, whether they're up close and personal or beautiful, is not an excuse for calling it a hoax. You're going to have to do heavy, heavy research. And it can't be photographic research because Billy Meyer, the photos are real. And I talked to, Wendell Stevens before he died. He was there. Wendell Stevens was there. He told me that Billy would get a call. He would walk out in the snow. His footprints would disappear. They'd have to go 2 cities over to pick him up. So everybody in the United States has dismissed the Billy Meyer case. It's over. And they will dismiss any other case that comes out. You have to, I talked to the townspeople in met Rudy. It was real. So
I'm glad. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you for mentioning all the difficulty a researcher can have in this field if they bring forth authentic cases, and which leads me to a question I had wanted to ask you, and that is, the amount of time you spent studying this topic, was it worth all the time you put into it?
Yeah, because I want to know. The only motive, it certainly isn't money, and it certainly isn't fame and fortune. Who in the world wants that over this? You lose. Don't even go into what you lose. I mean, because if your family isn't into it, it's really difficult. The thing is this, that I want to know. It's like Close Encounters when Roy Neary goes up to the government and says, "Tell me what's going on. I want to know." Do you remember that in the
yes.
movie?
Yeah.
Slams his hand on the ground, says, "Tell me." Well, nobody's going to tell you.
Right.
It's big top secret. So the only way you could figure it out is put the pieces of the puzzle together, connect the dots, which is my first book, Connecting the Dots, making sense of the UFO, and then read Jacques' book. Jacques actually connects all the dots. Jacques' books, Forbidden, I think it's called Forbidden Science, Volume 1. Actually, Volume 3 is the best because it's the most current. But, he's connected so many dots in there, and I just want to figure it out. It's like a detective. That's the only reason. And to realize that in the end, when we mention consciousness, you, me, Frank, are part of something greater. We're part of something huge in the cosmos. So that's the bottom line.
Paula, if you could go back in your UFO research and do anything differently, what would it be?
I'd have people with me. It's really hard I'd like a camera crew. I'd like somebody to transcribe everything that's said. I need help. I like a crew of people, not run around all by myself with a backpack on my back. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'd love to be part of a think tank where what you find out, you go to the university, you sit on, in a conference room, and everybody says, "Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think." Coming from research, not coming from your brain. What do you think? I'd love to be part of a serious situation, not entertainment and silliness. I don't want to waste time with that stuff. I would love to be just sit around and say, what do you think is happening from all perspectives worldwide?
Okay. And if you had a message that you would leave the world with If you had only 1 minute left to live, what would it be?
Read.
I like that. I like that. I'm a strong proponent of that myself. I'm a reader, so I know what you mean.
Well, yeah, if HYNEK wrote a book, read HYNEK's book. If Charles Hall wrote a book, read his book. The book on Billy Meyer is called And Still They Fly. Read Colin Andrews' book. Go to the source. Go to the source and read the source.
Right. Yeah, you know, so I'll go on to Facebook like anybody, and when I'm scrolling down the timeline of Facebook, I'll see these articles that say the title of the article, and then it'll say 2-minute read or 3-minute read, because people are so unwilling to spend their discretionary time to just read it, you know, the article or the book. They want to be pandered to and be told all these cheat notes on something.
Well,
and
tell me something.
Go ahead.
Who would you hire? If you're in aerospace, who would you hire that didn't do the studying? If you're in anthropology, who would you hire that didn't study the subject seriously?
Yeah.
That says they didn't want to read a book.
Right. That's a good question. I agree. And Frank, did you have any questions? I've been.
Well, you guys were rolling, and before we wrap up the show, I don't know, Paula, I don't know if you want to hang around this, but I've got a little something related to where I am 95% sure the best UFO data gathered by the military is going, and I do want to get to that. I'm ready to get to that. I mean, Paula, if you want to hang around and listen to this, you're more than welcome, but I do want to get to it before we wrap up here.
Do you mind if I ask her one last question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, if you could say anything about just the topic of ufology in general, aside from Reed, Paula, what would you say?
If we're part of something greater, like I just mentioned, and we are not just mere humans walking on this planet, and our history has to be totally rewritten. If you watch Ancient Aliens, wouldn't you want to know? And this is the last thing I can really say. It's have some intellectual curiosity, go to the source, and hang around with people that are studying this seriously, and take it away from the entertainment industry and making it a circus or entertainment or silliness. And it's probably the most important subject, as Robert Dean would say, connected with humanity. It's the most important subject you can research. And unfortunately, guys, I got to go because it went longer than I expected.
Well, I'm glad you hung around longer.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Paula. We are very grateful to you.
Thanks a lot, Paula.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, thanks, Chant. That was a really good interview. That was very interesting.
Thank you. That was thoroughly enjoyable, and I learned a lot.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So now we want to get to the part of the show that we've got running across on the news feed, where I'm going to discuss a little bit about where the very best evidence, and when I say very best evidence, I'm talking about the radar data. I'm talking about the gun camera footage. Much better, much more convincing, much less ambiguous footage than we've seen released over the last year or so. The actual witness accounts. Where does that data go that's gathered by the U.S. military? We know they're doing it. Where does it go? Where is this central repository? Now, I'm 100% convinced that such a place exists. There's no doubt in my mind that it exists somewhere. But where in this gigantic military operation does it go? And based on a little bit of research, I'm 95% convinced that this central repository for the very best UFO data goes to, are you ready? Drum roll,
yes.
Please. Chant, drum roll.
I'm
Okay. It goes to the Joint Base Anacostia Bowling in Washington, D.C. That's where I think it goes.
That's
So,
fascinating.
yeah, I know a lot of folks at home. As soon as I said that, I knew it. I knew it all along. Joint, of course, the Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. But I will go into a little bit of background about what goes on there. And that is obviously a big part of what convinced me. Now,
And do
first
you
off,
mind?
no,
Hold
go
on.
ahead.
I'm
No,
sorry. I
yeah.
want you to spell that because
Uh,
there's some people who might hear it and hear it kind of roll off your tongue. When you say Anacostia Bowling, it is ANACOSTIA dash B as in baby OLLING. Is that correct?
that is correct. Very easy to
Joint
find.
base.
And what it is, it's a joint naval and Air Force base. So, yeah, Anacostia was a naval, well, it still is, a naval support facility. And Bolling is, of course, Bolling Air Force Base. Now, Bolling Air Force Base has an interesting history related to UFOs. A couple of interesting things came out from there going back to the early 50s. During the Washington, D.C. UFO case of 1952, the head of Project Blue Book at that time, Captain Edward Ruppelt, happened to be in town. He was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Blue Book was under the umbrella of the ATIC, the Air Technical Intelligence Center, but he happened to be in town. And when he was briefed on the goings-on over Washington, D.C. Back in July of 1952, that's where he received his briefing at Bolling Air Force Base. So that's a little bit, an interesting little bit of history. And also in the 90s, Bill Clinton had requisitioned a report on the Roswell crash from the Air Force, and that report was generated also out of Bolling Air Force Base. That is the location for the Air Force, the headquarters for the Air Force Historical Support Division. That is the organization that generated that report for Clinton that a lot of people have ripped, and he asked what about the bodies and so on and so forth. But that is there. And also another interesting little aside, that Bolling Air Force Base is also the headquarters for AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Now, I'm going to get to the map here. We're going to take a closer look at Bolling.
I'm looking at the map right now.
At the Anacostia Bolling Joint Base there. The bases were merged, I believe, in the 1990s. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see off to the left, very interesting facility over there, the Naval Research Laboratory. That particular lab is under the umbrella of the Office of Naval Research. Now, the Office of Naval Research has been around, well, since before World War II. I didn't check the exact date when it was founded. My guess is probably around World War I. But that has never changed names. It has been the Office of Naval Research, and it continues to be to this very day. Going way back to the immediate post-World War II period, the titanium industry was founded in, the commercial titanium industry, I should say, was founded in December 1948, a year and a half after the Roswell crash. Now, this Naval Research Lab studies things like plasma space physics and material sciences, again, getting back to the founding of the titanium industry, which I think quite possibly could have been prompted by discovering that the Roswell craft that crashed might well have been made out of, in some part, titanium. There was no commercial industry for it before December of 1948. The Office of Naval Research is also involved in the development of nitinol, which is a shape memory alloy that was developed in the early 1960s. That was also, let me see here, how can I phrase this? That well, the shape memory alloys somewhat mimic some of the descriptions of morphing metal that were described by various and sundry Roswell witnesses. And also some of the other things that the Office of Naval Research has been involved with is commissioning a study from Duke University on the capabilities of squid and octopi to camouflage themselves. So that was, if you've ever seen different films of squid and octopi, either in the wild or in the lab, where they are able to camouflage themselves basically against their surroundings. Very interesting work. Obviously, they do a lot more than just that. And also, if you've been keeping up on the recent stories regarding ATIP, you know that there was a release of a list of studies conducted on behalf of ATIP. And among others, were papers regarding camouflage. So there's that. And perhaps most interesting of all, at this facility, right smack dab in the center, is the headquarters of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So, got a few things there, and like I said, I am quite convinced, 95% certain, that the best UFO data that the military gathers goes somewhere, and I believe that somewhere to be the joint base at Anacostia Bowling. So that's our little hint, bit of news for today that we've generated ourselves here. The reason I put it out now, again, I'm not 100% sure, but just in a couple of days of doing a little bit of research, I've had the opportunity to come across what goes on at this base. And like I say, I'm 95% sure that this is where the best information goes. And I put that out there because obviously we want to get a few other eyes on this situation, have them take a look, get some researchers on this. I'm going to continue to keep looking at any kind of updates I might have. I'm certainly going to bring them out here. We're not going to waste any time, and we're going to get right to it, even though, like I said, I don't have this 100% pinned down. But I think it's a lead. It's a lead for some of the researchers that are listening out there. And I think that the closer we look at this particular facility and what goes on there, it will become apparent as time goes on that that is where the central repository of the best UFO data gathered by the military ends up. So there, that's our little scoop for the day.
They're instrumental. Is that correct?
I think that is like I said, I think that is the central repository. All the hard drives. When we had PJ on our show a couple of weeks back, talking about how he was on the Nimitz and how the Air Force officers kind of came off the mainland and came onto the ship and gathered up the hard drives. I think those hard drives end up there. Hard drives, again, with the radar data, with the gun camera footage, with the interviews of witnesses and so on. It goes somewhere. I'm certain of that. Where's that somewhere? It's got to be somewhere. I think that is the location of the somewhere.
Well, it is an interesting timeline. The Office of Naval Research, called ONR, was created with the blessings of President Harry Truman, August 1st of 1946. And it executes its mission through science and technology departments, corporate programs, and Naval Research Laboratory, and the Office of Naval Research Global Office. Regarding the nitinol, which is nickel titanium, part of a shape memory alloy, it's a metal alloy of nickel and titanium where the two elements are present in roughly equal atomic percentages. What does that have to do with anything? Does it have to do with the list that you were mentioning regarding the AATIP academic studies list and the new discoveries?
I'd have to go back over the list. I don't think so. But what nitinol is basically a shape memory alloy. It's a morphing metal, essentially, which is described by some of the Roswell witnesses that the metal, some of the metal fragments that were found, also has those properties, those shape memory properties.
Okay, I see how you're marrying that into the topic of ufology.
Just a little background information, you know.
Understood. Okay, got it. All right. By the way, did you want to say anything else about that AATIP academic studies list?
Not right now. We'll be covering it in a little bit more detail. I think James is putting together a show on that. We'll have Danny Silva back on again. I believe Keith Basterfield will be on discussing that probably within roughly the next month. But I did want to get this out there today. Like I said, I think it's a very good lead. I think this is where the data goes. So there's that. And I could be wrong, but if I am, hey, tell me where the right place is, because I am 100% convinced that best UFO data goes somewhere. It's got to go somewhere.
That's a great way to put it. If they think that you're wrong, maybe they should point you in the right direction.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I'm throwing it out there right now. I'm confident, like I said, 95% confident that this is the place, but we will see. If I'm wrong, again, I'd like to see. I'd like the correct answer. So I'm throwing it out there. And any folks listening who want to do a little bit of research, by all means, get to it. And, let's see what we come up with, because obviously the powers that be aren't being really cooperative on all that. But we know the data's there. The radar, physical evidence of UFOs. I've been hammering that point home for a few years now. That's what it is. It's physical evidence. It's a form of remote sensing. The gun camera footage. Much better gun camera footage than the FLIR and the Go Fast videos that we've seen released so far. Much better, much less ambiguous. Clearly, craft not of this earth. That kind of material is located somewhere. Again, 95% sure at this point that that place is the joint base at Anacostia Bowling. So we will see. We'll see if this turns into anything. Like I say, I think it's a good lead. I think it's worth your time to take a closer look at. And obviously, I'm going to be continuing to do that as well. So there we have it.
Fantastic, Frank. Well, thank you very much for ending on that note. And I would also like to thank Paola Harris, the Italian-American photojournalist and investigative reporter in the field of UFOs and extraterrestrial-related phenomena, for having been on our show today.
Well, you kept her engaged. She told us initially she'd have an hour for us, and you kept her on the line for about an hour 45. So obviously she enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, she's a wonderful person, and I would also like to mention that I look forward to future interviews with her.
All right, so let's wrap it up. We've hit the 2-hour mark. Let's wrap it up. We've got more shows coming up next week. We'll start spamming and promoting them as we get a little bit closer. But for now, I think we had a good day. A great interview with Paola and some interesting information that hopefully provides some leads to some of our other armchair researchers or not so armchair researchers who are out there looking to find out more, looking to gain knowledge, as John Mack might say, looking to gain knowledge about this UFO subject. So let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You have a great rest of the week, and we will be back later next week, Thursday and Friday. I think we've got a couple shows lined up, and more is on the way. So thanks again. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
You as well. Goodbye.